Welcome everybody to Monday Night Chat Show on this bank holiday Monday. Thought it'd be a very interesting topic if we discussed men and women as negotiators. And tonight I've got Eva Fanari from New Mexico, who's done some research on our behalf with estate agents or realtors, as Eva calls them, in Albuquerque to see what happened. I've always thought, and I don't know whether I'm right, and this is a very controversial subject we're talking about tonight, so I thought it would be great fun to do. I've always thought that in the US, women were ahead of ladies and women in Europe in the business world. More CEOs heading up large companies, and in fact there's only 3 women CEOs in the top 100 FTSE companies in the UK, and I know one of them very well, but I wish I could get her on the show, but she doesn't answer my emails at the moment. I need to remind her of the coaching I did for her when she worked for Barclays. Her name is Alison, and she works for Whitbread, and she's the CEO of Whitbread. I'm going to just share my screen just for a minute to remind you of one or two things. On Thursday, I did a webinar for CIMA, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, and there were 600 people on it from all over the world. And on Saturday, I did a keynote speech for Toastmasters, and I called it The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Negotiators. So I thought I'd just remind you of what those habits were. And Eva and I were talking about those habits an hour ago, and just seeing which of those habits that men and women might be better at in our opinions, and all our opinions will be different. And I was talking to John from the PSA last night in Swanage, having a beer with him, and we were talking about, do introverts or extroverts make better negotiators, which is another subject for later on. Now I always kick off my talks with a little bit of motivation or a little bit of fun, and this is one I picked up a few years ago. Is opportunity nowhere, or is it now here? Because is your glass half empty, or is it half full? Is the opportunity to negotiate now, or is it nowhere? And it's your choice, so you can make your minds up. And that's how I put it to the people from my study here in Guildford, talking to all sorts of people, feeling a bit Billy No Mates, as Tim and a few other people have done when you're presenting on Zoom, and you know there's a lot of people out there, but you're not sure really where they are. So these are the 7 habits of great negotiators, according to the Gospel of Derek Arden. Number 1 is preparation and positioning. Number 2 is questioning. Number 3 is listening. Number 4 is reading the signals, the body language, the signs, how people say things. Number 5 is the psychology of tactics, all geared up to get you down to your bottom line as fast as possible. And number 6 is bargaining and haggling. And number 7 is confidence. So just let's go through those very quickly, Eva, you and I, and let's see if we think, and then we'll do a little poll, whether we think men or women are better at these. I think we said it was probably even, wasn't it, on preparation, positioning from memory?
Yes, we agreed that most likely it comes down to a specific personality type, how they prepare and how they position themselves right off the gate, if they know what positioning even is.
Yeah, and what I mean by positioning is how you put your positioning statement on selling, what your best position, target position, walk away, and alternative position, as you know, and I won't go through all those now, but that's very little preparation goes into most negotiations. That's why on big deals they bring in banks, corporate finance advisors, etc., etc. How about questioning? That was a bit of it in the balance as well, Eva, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so too. I think, again, it comes down to a specific person, how they go about inquiring information about the situation they're about to get into. And I think questioning a little bit goes under the preparation for me.
Yeah, and the quality of the questions determines the quality of the answers you get. But we were pretty unanimous that women were probably better at listening than men, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
At least we want plenty of disagreement here. reading the signals is an interesting one, because that might be balanced as well. The research says that women are better at reading body language than men are generally. And when I'm speaking at a conference and I'm talking about body language, or showing body language pictures, or talking about steepling or praying or whatever signals you're getting back, generally I've got every woman in the audience nodding, and some of the blokes looking a bit puzzled at me, which is always interesting. And I did dig out Alan Pease's book while we're talking, Why Men Don't Listen and Why Women Can't Read Maps. And you probably remember that was written about 20 years ago with probably a sexist title in those days. I don't know, it wasn't in those days, but that was, they changed the title of that book from The Difference Between Men and Women to Why Men Don't Listen and Why Women Don't Read Maps. And it sold an extra 19 million copies worldwide. Then we come to tactics and influence, and we probably thought men were better at that. Did we, Eva? I can't remember.
Yes, we did. We did, and I think the last three kind of very intertwined, at least in my world. And yes, I would say that men are just a little bit better in tactics and influences. And yes.
Yeah, and also perhaps in bargaining and haggling, but it doesn't. It's a very generalization, as we know. You know, NLP talks about generalizations, and that's what we're doing now, sweeping generalizations. But this was just a debate. And then when we came to confidence, you had some strong views on confidence, didn't you?
I do have strong views on confidence, and I think that men definitely take the gold medal in confidence. But when you look at the last three, they are standing right on the shoulders of confidence.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll just drop that. Now, Eva, you've done some research for us.
Yes,
in Albuquerque. Talk us through the research you've done.
Yes. So I'm a real estate broker or estate agent, as you would say in United Kingdom, and I train realtors as well. That's my everyday job. But in the real estate world, all we do is negotiate all day long. And I know what the research says about women's and men's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to negotiating. But I wanted to see if professionals who pay very little attention to the research and just go and do it every day, do they have actually similar experiences in today's world? So I asked my fellow experienced brokers a couple of questions. And my first question was very straightforward, or at least that's what I thought. I asked, who are better negotiators, men or women, based on your experience in the field? Everyone I asked couldn't come up with a straight answer, and clearly my question was not straight enough. So I tweaked my question a little bit and I asked, think of the most aggressive realtor or estate agent who you have ever had to do a transaction with. Was it a man or a woman? And it was a better way, since I got a very precise answer from everybody. Every single person I spoke to responded that the most aggressive realtor they've worked with was a woman, and aggressive to the point of being difficult to work with. That has also been my experience. That question led to the third question, which of course was this. If research shows that in negotiation, women are more likely to leave money on the table compared to men, then why do you think that it's women who are more aggressive, or the most aggressive person you work with has been a woman? And this really got the conversations going. The answer was that most likely women negotiate as if they have something to prove to someone, as if there's this fear that if I'm not aggressive enough, I'm not being taken seriously. And what if I leave money on the table for my client? So this self-questioning has led to self-doubt. And in the space of self-doubt, we no longer know where the boundaries are. As a result, women sometimes overdo it. So they get overly aggressive and assertive when it's really not necessary. I like how my mother describes it. She says that sometimes she tells this to me. There is no reason to bring out the cannon to kill a fly. And when I was having this conversation with fellow professionals, that saying popped into my head. Maybe sometimes women, in fear of not being aggressive enough, they bring out the cannon to kill a fly. And my last question was, think of a transaction where you really admired the negotiation tactics of the cooperating broker, and why was that? And again, we came back to women. Every single person I spoke to said that the most admirable and the greatest experience they have had in a negotiation situation was again with women. So the reasons for that was that women are great at reading nonverbal clues, just as Derek said, and they understand the underlying emotions. They're really tuned into the emotional sense of a transaction, which makes them open to being vulnerable and asking help. To give you an example, in sense that, well, this is really not going well. I'm just calling you off the record. How can we make this work? This is what's going on our side of the negotiation. What are your thoughts on it? That's courage to be vulnerable in a situation where emotions run high and a lot of money is on the table, which also makes women really good at tearing down the walls. If the walls are starting to go up and we're starting to get into a headstand, women are really good at breaking through those. It's almost as if when at their best, women act as if they are not negotiating at all. They are kind of like undercover negotiators or sneaky negotiators. They are negotiating while they make you feel like they're not negotiating at all. They're just having this heart-to-heart conversation with you. It's still a negotiation. But in conclusion, from my experience in the field and when I was talking to other professionals in my offices, in the Nordic countries, we have this saying that there is no bad weather, just poor clothing. I would say that there are no bad negotiators, just poor techniques, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, Eva. I'm just writing down one or two of the things that you came out with. You've come up with a few nuggets there that I need to capture. I love that from your mum. No reason to bring out the cannons to kill a fly. Mm-hmm. Does she tell you that when you're speaking to her on Zoom?
No, but I remember when I was a teenager and I would, get into fights or disagreements with my friends. And one time she would try to be on my side, but one time that's what she said. And she's a psychologist.
Oh, so, psychologist as well.
Childhood psychologist who ended up working with teenagers.
Oh, wow. Wow. And of course, lived under the Russians for 35 years under the, let's not forget that. That would be an interesting experience, wouldn't it? And when we're looking at high profile negotiators, I think probably one of the best negotiators over the last 20 years is Mrs. Merkel in Germany. I don't think there's too much doubt about that, holding the coalitions together in Germany when the wall came down, sorting out those issues and trying to make East Germany as wealthy as West Germany, which hasn't gone quite to plan, has it?
No, it hasn't. It definitely hasn't. But when it comes to Miss Merkel, she has the ability to de-escalate and still assert herself, which is, I think, the highest quality in negotiating world. Definitely something to emulate.
Okay, guys, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure about whether you can say guys or not. I've been having a few lessons on what's PC and what's not PC this week as well. So I'm trying to be really careful, although there's some crazy things going on. I nearly said stuff there. Patricia Fripp was coaching me again on Saturday for something I said wrong on the Toastmasters. But all good fun. So I'm going to put you into breakout groups now, 6 breakout rooms, which are going to be assigned automatically. And the question is, who do you think makes the best negotiators, men or women? And what examples have you got of that? So the breakout rooms will be assigned automatically, and we'll see you back in 8 minutes and 20 seconds time. Here we go. All rooms are open. You just need to join your room. You probably just need to click on join the room.
would say depends on the experiences of the negotiator which you get on the other side. Yeah. So it's the most difficult thing is to get the other side, let's say, to get this convenience that you are really looking for the win-win situation. So usually people are thinking how to win, just to win. But
recording started. Unmute myself. That looks good. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, let's find out what we discovered. So if room, should we go? Let's go in the backwards order. Let's go with the all-female group of Amy and Christine. What did you discover?
We had a wonderful discussion. Thank you for putting us together. We end up in our rooms together quite a lot, so it was great. We talked about the nature nurture sort of discussion and the deliberate practice. So if you think about if you've been in a larger family, by the time you get to an adult age, you've had a lot of practice in negotiation if you're in a larger family, and there's some benefits from that. And we also talked about the importance of patience. Probably links in with your bargaining and haggling, but if you've learnt the sort of that virtue of patience, that will really set you up as a good negotiator. So we didn't think that it was a sex issue. We just thought it was more of a personality, and virtues of patience and practice came into play.
Fantastic. And Christine, you were a lawyer, or you are a lawyer still. Do you have a view on female lawyers?
Well, of course, they say that old lawyers never die, they just lose their appeal.
Excellent, excellent.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we go to the next? Let's go to an all-male room now, shall we? I think that's that would be Godfrey, John, and Martin. See how that comes out.
Well, we spent 8 minutes negotiating who was going to present our findings. And then immediately what was discussed, it's a classic banking phrase, it depends. It depends firstly on the type of negotiation. It depends on culture, and John introduced his experience in the Far East, where you would never normally have a woman in a leading negotiation. And I also introduced, there are different types of negotiations. We must remember it's not always face-to-face, it can be on the telephone, and it can be in writing. And my experience of so many years in investigation, but focusing on debt and fraud, is actually, this started when I was in Barclays. A study was done that if you're writing, the best producer of results in written negotiation on debt is a female spinster Scottish lady. So if the letter was signed Miss Elizabeth MacDonald, you were going to get a much better result than a Mr. Godfrey Lancashire. And that then led into my experience of more practical debt negotiations, that a woman was very often better because she would have more empathy. And interestingly, right at the beginning, before the negotiation even started, she was much less of a threat. So if you took a situation of walking down the garden path, she was going to have the door open for her. Whereas if there was a big 6'3" male, he might go down the garden path, but maybe the door wouldn't even get opened in the first place. So there are definite differences, and we should understand that it isn't always the same situation.
Now, I've known you a long time, Godfrey. What was the name of that Scottish woman that you made up when you were sitting in your office, or is it absolutely true?
Yeah, well, it is true. Well, it was Elizabeth Hanforth who was the real Scottish solicitor, but we changed her surname several times on different letters.
Wow. Wow. And those of you that missed Godfrey's fantastic presentation on the show last year, Godfrey walked down the garden path to be faced with a 12-bore shotgun, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. That's another story, but yes, so there are different situations which I'm sure we've all met, but I do believe that women are much better in certain situations. That's not to say that men are better in other situations, but it isn't. I think it's horses for courses.
Well, that's great. Okay, well, let's go to room 4 because we've got 2 Americans in that room and Martin Bale. So we've got Janice and Tim and Martin. What was your conclusions?
Let's go with Tim.
No, well, I didn't really have anything. Janice had a great point and Martin had a great point, and I said, I hope we get to discuss this. So I'll turn it over. Ladies first. No chauvinism intended. Janice, go.
You're so polite. So I have a lot of thoughts, but my biggest point was that women in general, at least in America, are not taught how to negotiate. I do see it a lot in real estate, but in dealing with salary negotiation, or as I'm an independent professional speaker, a lot of people don't come back. Let's say if you propose a number or a range of numbers and it's too high or whatever, they don't come back and say, is there any wiggle room? A lot of people just don't know when it's appropriate to negotiate and when it isn't, and how to do it.
When you say people, you mean women. Is that right?
I think, yeah, women in general, yes.
Yes. Martin?
Anything else from your team, Tim?
Yeah, Martin had a good point about personality. He actually had his hand raised before we left. Is he still here?
Yeah, he's still here.
Go ahead, Martin.
You're muted, I think, Martin. Yep, you're muted. You need to unmute. Yep, you're okay now.
Yeah, John Lisby made a point just before we broke out about the male, female, and yeah. I just had another issue as well around, irrespective of how good a negotiator you may be, a lot is down to personalities involved. So if the wrong person is negotiating, then it's probably not going to work well, whether it's female or male. Yeah. And I just feel that if you get that right at the outset, then there's more of a chance of you succeeding with a negotiation. And Tim will give you an example of in a minute of what happened to him the other day with his blinds lady. But the point that Janice made as well about the training, and as you know, I came from a banking background, and I was just thinking back of what Janice said, and even in our organization, it wasn't probably until quite well into my career that you had any training on negotiation. And as you know, you came in and did sessions for other banks as you did in Barclays. So I think it is a point on the training side. And as I say, down to personalities as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Martin. And Tim, you had another point before we move on to the next group?
Well, it was just a case. I was struck by what Eva said in that some women tend to go too far, and they cross the line. And that actually just happened yesterday to my wife and I. We're looking at installing blinds, window treatments, and this woman came out and she gave us a price that was triple anybody else. Could have bought a small car for it. And we started pushing back, and she got incredibly irate about what a great designer she was, and she's been doing this for 30 years. And I ended up showing her the door in a polite way. I just said, well, we'll have to think about it. But we had other bids. We have other bids. And it was just a case of, she just went too far and lost all sight of boundaries. And my wife was ready to crown her, but not in the good way, not in the royalty way.
Tim, when you showed her the door, did she say to you, I've got a blind for that as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Ryan, how's that little negotiator you're holding there? She win a lot?
She wins everything.
I think used to it. I think in that case, Ryan, we better go to your group of John, Nancy, who's crossed the pond a few times herself, and Ryan. Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, well, they elected me the speaker this time because you can see Ryan's got his hands full, and John's got variable signal. Well, we had a really interesting discussion about it all. 3 key points that I wanted to make about it is that really, and I think it was Martin was referring to this, or one of the others, you've got to think about what kind of negotiation it is, because if it's a transactional negotiation, you don't care what your relationship's going to be like with the person you're negotiating with. You may take a different kind of stance than you would if you care about the relationship and long-term engagement with your counterpart. So there's one thing that we thought about, in terms of what's going on. And we felt that you got a better negotiation if you had a man and a woman together as a team, because you're working off of the strengths of both in terms of what's going on. So I know that Ryan was talking about buying a car, and that's very transactional, and how it was for him doing that with his wife as well. So they were doing a duo. Myself, my husband and I recently bought our home. I mean, it was 3 years ago, but it was, he was the softer side. I was the tougher one in the negotiations, so that was fine. And it's taking those strengths of either side. But one of the things that I quoted to Ryan and John was the fact that there is a specialist, a communication specialist in the United States, a lady named Deborah Tannen, who has done incredible research on the difference between the ways men communicate and women communicate. And so men communicate to establish independence and status. Women communicate to establish association and collaboration. So that's the fundamental, if you like, driver of communication for the different sexes. Now, of course, anything as sweeping as who's better at negotiation, but you think about that in terms of negotiation. So one of the things I remember Derek's always said is, keep your ego under control. And that sort of talks to the man that's wanting to show that he's the winner and he's going to get the best deal. So that's status and independence. But the female wants to associate and collaborate, which is about perhaps finding the win-win and making the relationship. So those are 2 sweeping, differences, but notice it in your own communication with others in the next few days, and you'll see, because I find it in business all the time, that when I'm talking to a woman, I will talk about what's going on and what you might have in common, those sorts of things. Where I talk with a man, it's more, so what do you do, and get them the chance to talk about how they stand out in life. There we go. That's my comments.
Nancy, I'm so happy that you brought up Deborah Tannen. I think she's a minor deity when it comes into men and women in conversation, and all of her books are good. As a matter of fact, she was very helpful for me when I had responsibilities in business, communicating with men and with women separately and together. It was Deborah Tannen. I'll put her name in the chat box.
What's her signature book? I think I bought one.
Men and Women in Conversation.
Okay, that's
no. I've got 5 different books by her on my bookshelf. She's got a number of them. The one about working 9 to 5 was also. I read that and I basically got depressed. I'm going to leave business. But yeah.
We don't read books to get depressed, do we? We try not to. The odd one gets us like that. But okay, let's go to room 3, which is Jill, Lynn, and Paul.
We couldn't even negotiate who would speak. I guess that's we were too polite with each other. So I did say I felt slightly outnumbered, but that's just mathematically. But I would just make my immediate point, and Jill and Lynn can come in. But without a doubt, Jill, if she mentioned once, you can't generalize. She mentioned it 100 times. But that's the other angle from the banking. It depends. But my point was that I feel and it's interesting that some people have said contrary to this, that typical man would have a shorter fuse in a negotiation than a woman. I think the alpha male sort of trips in. If he's not getting his own way, he will then become a bit more dominant and Yeah, and that would not work well. My view is that a woman would do better because their fuse is a bit longer. I think it's right though that you can't generalize, but that's how my feeling. But anyway, I will hand over either Jill or Lynn, or even Jin if you want. Jill or Lynn.
Yeah, well, we'll go to Jill because I can hear Jill saying that with all her experience at Willesden Tech as head of HR. Can you imagine that? No generalisation here.
Yeah, well, no, I just think that I know some men who are extremely astute and better than women when it comes to what I think are the key things, which is listening, recognizing what the other person needs, and actually ensuring that what you end up with is a win-win, where both sides are satisfied. I guess the example I came up with, and I'm not was around when you're either buying or selling. The most successful salespeople are the ones that actually identify the customer's needs and meet the need. And the important thing in many instances is it's not today's sale. A friend of mine's a car salesman. He was brilliant, and he used to sell to every member of the family more than once. So I think a lot of it is to do with relationships.
Yeah,
which is perhaps a more feminine approach. And I also think there's a bit of an age thing as well, because there are some gender-based attitudes which are less prevalent in younger people than they are in older people, and so you can find that somebody who is a little bit chauvinist can completely miss the boat if their client is a woman.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Particularly buying cars. I don't know if this happens in America, but certainly in the UK, often the salesperson, if the man and woman come in, often the salesperson will only talk to the man. And gee whiz, my wife goes crazy about that. And I'm trying to give the guy a clue. I'm trying to look him in the eye and then go, like that. This is going to be my wife's car. Get a grip. She's
actually, it's interesting you should say that, Derek, because when I last went for the service of my car, they still had it in my husband's name. And I said, look, he hasn't been around. He died 2.5 years ago. So why have you still got it in his name? And
oh, wow.
So that's so irritating. But and my only contribution was to say that I used to negotiate pay and terms and conditions when I was working in HR. But I had a sidekick, a man. So we played it quite well together, I think, really. We usually ended up where we wanted to be between the two of us.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point that has been made 2 or 3 times, that if you're in difficult negotiations, having a man and a woman there with roles, and actually, maybe the woman reading the body language and getting all the feeling of it, if that's their best skill, and it is a generalization, and then remembering to take that vital time out when you discuss what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've felt, and then before you go back in the room and maneuver, change your best position, target position, and walk away position. Yeah, but of course,
that's all preparation as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and team preparation as well. And I think
butt in because there is one. I assisted at one. I attended one negotiation where on one side there were 3 very tough business cookies, all men, very hard negotiators. On the other side, there was a young, beautiful lady and a man, and the young, beautiful lady had a very low-cut dress. Now, I'm not sure whether this was body language. I'm not sure whether it's good listening or good speaking or raising pertinent questions. All I can say, and I had this as a personal experience, she made absolute mincemeat of these 3 top-rated negotiators. She got everything she wanted.
Fantastic.
She really made mincemeat of them. So, I'll leave the interpretation of all this to you, but I can tell you this is a story.
Great point.
Sounds like she'd got what they wanted as well.
Maybe so.
Hang on, Martin, this is being recorded. Do you mind? Sorry that the young children might be watching this on YouTube. Gabby, who couldn't be with us today, you know, my NLP instructor, my pal, she talks about generalizations, and those of you who've done NLP will know the word lies. If you change one letter, you can put the word lies in the middle of generalizations. But she's a very successful salesperson now for St. James's Place, as you know, and in fact, she won the top award as new. But she's quite happy to admit that she's flirtatious when she goes in selling to guys, and that it works. Now, I'm not quite sure what degree of flirtatious she means, but I know really well she just plays the game, really. And I think that's what we've been talking about, and uses her skills to close the sale. Where have we got to? I think we've got another couple of rooms to go, haven't we? So let's go to Gregor and Nigel, I think it is, isn't it? And you were in that room as well, Eva. You need to unmute whoever's going for it.
Well, we discussed most of what has already been covered, but one of the things that we did discuss that hasn't been spoken about was that women negotiators tend to be better at looking at the longer term view, i.e. the sort of, 5-10 year view, and about how the sort of change management program, particularly if it's a merger or acquisition, the consequences beyond the direct negotiation. So we felt that the female perspective was much softer, perhaps, than the more kind of bravado alpha male, let's just get this negotiation concluded. And we also talked or skirted around the different cultural differences and the appropriateness potentially for having the right cultural background on the negotiation team to understand that sort of culture without falling into any issues by not following or observing those expectations in terms of manner, stance, dress, or in the sort of Japanese culture of following the order on the processes of the meetings, as opposed to a more European or an American style to go for the close too early and not necessarily seeing the wider, bigger picture when it comes to the negotiation. So does Eva or Gregor want to add anything else?
Eva, go for it.
Yes, I will. My most memorable moment from our breakout room was when I asked Nigel and Gregor, how do they behave when they have a woman on the other side? Do they see it? Do they act differently? Do they approach it differently? And they both said that yes, they would negotiate with women differently than with men. They would approach with greater care. They'd be a little bit more cautious of how they speak, make sure not to really go in, with iron nails on their boots and march around in somebody's heart. I really appreciated you gentlemen opening up about that. And I think we do change how we negotiate depending on who's on the other side. And this is not personality, just gender-based. It's a man versus it's a woman.
Yeah.
Because that lady that was mentioned who had a little bit of a bigger cleavage, if she had had 3 women on the other side, she might have chosen a different outfit.
What a great point that is. That's very interesting. And we haven't talked about female to female negotiations, so I'll come to that. I think Gregor wanted to make a point as well. Did you?
I would just like to add what are the measurables of being good negotiator? Yeah, what is the measure of success? Let's say, we are always talking about win-win. And if you find on the opposite side, the person who is also looking for this win-win and the long-term partnership, it's a little bit different than just to who will win that case. Yeah. So which are the measurables of the good negotiators?
Well, Gregor, I don't suppose you need to pick up my book again, don't you? Because the 12 points in the book are there for you and you can do the scores on them. So perhaps I need to do another session on negotiating, but it's only £6 on a Kindle today on Amazon. So if you've lost your copy, get yourself another copy.
I still have it.
Okay, well, that's a pity. I was hoping to sell another one today. No, that's a great point. March around in someone's heart. I'm getting a few great metaphors here to use going forward. I love that one. I love that one. I mean, of course, it does all come down to preparation, doesn't it? And how we do it and what we do. But it's interesting. What's the view on female to female negotiations? We talked about male to male, which one of the things I tell people not to do is to sit across the table, male to male, if you can help it, particularly a wide table. So first of all, you're more than arm's length apart. You know, we do business transactions should be done at arm's length. That's why we use that jargon metaphor. We sit across the table and then the guys start staring each other out like it's a macho contest, and the testosterone starts building, etc. And suddenly it becomes I've got to win more than you, rather than a long-term win-win. And what is the measure of a long-term win-win? Because it doesn't look like a win-win that the Glazers got with Manchester United 16 years ago now, does it? So who knows? But some of the transactions I saw in investment banking when hostile takeovers were going on, the egos got carried away totally. And deals were done at 3 o'clock in the morning, which isn't the best time to do a deal. The stock exchange has to be notified, I think, 2 hours before it opens, and it opens at 7:30 if a hostile takeover is going to be announced, and therefore sleepy heads don't make the best negotiators. Stupid decisions are made at when people are tired and knackered. I couldn't think straight, you know, but anyway, you know, it's something for another time. So Nancy, Ava, Amy, what about these women to women negotiations? Or Jill? Lynn? Janice, go for it.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned, and it applies to this question, and that is the preconceived notion you have about the other person. If a woman, like you said, a woman wearing a low-cut dress and another woman is in the negotiation, that might work against them. If the woman is extremely beautiful and you get a feeling that she's always gotten her way, then that might put a damper on your openness to communicating with them. We were talking a moment ago about women communicating to show collaboration. So, but if you have let's say you were bullied in high school and she looks like one of the mean girls, all of that is going to come into play because people hang on to the old wounds in their life. So for me, preconceived notions are part of the issue. I see Nancy laughing.
Yeah. And of course, that's triggers and anchors in NLP, isn't it? You know, we never forget anything. And all we need is a reminder, a trigger of that. So what was that word? What was that? I wanted to write that down, Janice. What did you call this woman? Bullied in high school?
One of the mean girls.
One of the mean, okay, got that one.
There is a funny tween video movie called Mean Girls, and you'll enjoy watching it just for a few. You won't be able to stand the whole thing.
Looks like Tim's watched it, obviously. Nancy, you were nodding there as well, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I have a daughter, so I've seen Mean Girls more times than I can tell you, but it does reflect what happens to teenagers and some of the pain that they carry, therefore, through the rest of their life. And yeah, I think Janice has got a fair point in terms of perspective, so you've got somebody different in front of you than you've negotiated with before. So where's the trigger to that person? And it can be all sorts of different things, can't it? It's not just male, female. There's all sorts of different, it can be somebody from up north or Scotland and somebody from down south. That kicks off all sorts of things in this country. That's one of the things I'm astonished by in the UK is how much, your accent comes into play. That's, I've lived here 40 years and it's still an issue.
Nancy, what part of the US do you live in?
Sorry?
What part of the US do you live in?
I don't live in the US. I live in the Surrey Hills outside of London.
Oh,
30
I'm sorry.
miles.
I'm sorry. The reason I ask is that I've lived in the South for 40 years. And I will tell you, you don't ever want to try to negotiate a Southern woman because they get whatever they want.
Yeah.
And Janice, you know what I'm talking about. The Southern Belles, as we call them. It's astonishing, really. And they never stomp their feet or yell or shout. They just use their wiles. It's remarkable compared to women in the North.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Nancy?
You know, I haven't lived in America for 40 years, so I don't know anymore, really. But because I lived in Chicago, I moved over here to the UK from Chicago.
Okay.
So I'm originally from Kansas, which is right smack in the middle, just north of Texas.
Yes, it is.
You know,
great state of Kansas.
So Gone with the Wind would be a perfect example of Tim's point.
Precisely. Multiplied by millions.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just mention one other thing that John referred to in our breakout group, and John, you can come in, but John said completely the opposite from the popular phrase, which are women are the weaker sex. He said absolutely women are the stronger sex, and it's because they have a real belief in what they want or where they're going. John, over to you, but that's what you said. I wrote it down.
Yeah, I agree. The impression I have, the knowledge I have from, the experience I have with dealing with women in negotiations is they have something which is much stronger, and that is they really know what they want, and they know how to get it, and they know this much more intrinsically than men do. Men play as if they know, but they don't really know like a woman knows.
Wow.
And the women let them believe that.
Oh gosh, Derek, this could go on for ages.
Guys, this is getting
my experience.
This is getting really heavy. I'm just going to close now and turn the recording off.
I'm sorry.
Let's stay on. But it's make up your mind time now, because I've put a poll, and the poll's coming up. And you can't sit on the fence here, Godfrey or Martin or any of those bankers. Who are the best, men or women? Vote now.
This is wicked, Derek.
It's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible. Oh, it's moving around. It's moving around. Women have got it at the moment. It's 57 to 43 at the moment. 60-40. 15 people have voted. Somebody's sitting on the fence and not voted. Actually, that's 2 people. But I'm going to end the poll now. So, can you see the poll, by the way?
No.
No.
Okay. Share the results. So they're the results of our jury from Slovenia, from America, from the UK are in, and women get it. So my advice to you guys is you better get into your feminine side, because clearly the feminine side is a win-win. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Thanks for joining on YouTube and on the Negotiators podcast. Please like the videos on the podcast, send me any comments, and join us on the Monday night chat show. Thanks for joining, everybody. Give everybody a wave. Let's have a wave, which is the new handshake, isn't it? And good night.